Hey everyone, good evening.
Good evening.
We are so excited to be able to join you guys and talk about mindset tonight. So, hopefully you guys have maybe something to drink or a bowl of ice cream, or I don't know, something to be able to settle in and chat with us for a few minutes. We're talking about something that we think is really important.
Yeah, I think this is a really crucial one because it really shapes a lot of what we do and how we view our lives in general and what we're able to achieve or not achieve. And as we're going to get into, this really actually originates pretty early in our life in a lot of cases, which makes it kind of difficult to shift if you need to make a shift. So I think, at least for me, this has been something that I've struggled with a lot and still struggle with. And so I think it's really important, and hopefully we can share some things that'll help you. And we'd love to take any questions as we go along, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about growth and fixed mindset and kind of like defining what those are. And I did some research and found some fun images. I like images, like infographics, aren't they so fun? I don't know. I think they're fun. And one of the ones that I found was really talking about kind of examples. So what is the fixed mindset? Well, this is a person that believes that their intelligence, their abilities are set in stone, they're fixed, and that personal effort doesn't really have an impact on what they, on this. No matter what they do, that's going to be set in stone. They believe that they kind of feel pressured to look the part, to like look smart, to kind of like have the swag, because they believe they're defined by their natural abilities. They avoid challenging material in order to protect their self-esteem, because again, they're relying on their natural abilities. They give up in the face of setbacks because they attribute this challenge to a lack of ability. And they ignore or avoid constructive criticism because they see it as an attack, again, on their natural abilities. They feel diminished by others' success because they believe that success is unattainable, again, without natural ability. And then versus the growth mindset. So this is a person that believes their intelligence and abilities can grow through personal effort. They feel motivated to get smart, to actually work, because they know that effort maximizes their abilities. They welcome the challenging material and improve their self-esteem and abilities in the process. They persist in the face of setbacks, and they believe they can prevail with sufficient effort. They embrace criticism as a learning tool and a means of improving. And then they feel inspired by others' success instead of feeling like they're doing the comparison game. They're looking at other people's success because they know that success is attainable for themselves if they keep going, if they keep putting in the effort. So I thought that was a good way to kind of summarize the two different types of mindsets.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great starting point. I think, too, I've seen it described another way where one reason that people, or I've seen encouragement for parents and how you're talking to your kids is instead of telling the kid, let's say they bring home a book report or a report card and saying, oh, you're so smart, instead of saying, oh, I'm really proud of how hard you worked on that, because it emphasizes not their innate intelligence, but rather that they really worked on something to make it good, to do a good job at it. Because I think, the IQ test, I don't know, I think especially we give so much weight to that in Western culture, at least in the United States. And we're so tied up in this, oh, what's your IQ? How smart are you? How good are you at math or a particular science subject? And we neglect the other kind of intelligences that there are, whether that's creative, whether that's working with your hands. Emotional, sure. And even with the IQ test, it's been proven that that fluctuates. That's not a set limit. That's not something that is set in stone. It's something that changes. The more you learn, the more you grow in a particular area. And yet sometimes we put so much clout in those kind of things that can really damage somebody psychologically if theirs isn't at a certain point that we view is good enough.
Right, and that's something too that I feel like too, if I know my IQ is XYZ, then I'm not going to push myself maybe further, or I may allow myself to believe that I can't push myself further because I think, oh, that's just set in place and I can't do anything about that. And I think too, like you were saying, it's required of us when we step in from the fixed mindset to the growth mindset to be creative, to actually step out of our comfort zones. And that's a little scary because then we have to get creative. We have to find other solutions. We have to actually accept this is my responsibility. This is within my control, and I can actually pursue other things that will help me get there, versus whether it's resources or asking other people for help, or just simply being willing to think differently than you did before and open your mind up to the possibility that you could grow in this area. So what kind of things would you say are some detriments when it comes to like your comfort zone? Because that was one thing I was thinking about is with a fixed mindset, it's like you're in your comfort zone, right? You're like, oh, well, this is what I was naturally given, so what do I do?
I think it limits what we are capable of doing, and we feel then safe in a particular set, especially if we've grown up and we've been told, oh, you're the music kid, or you're the sports kid, right, or you're the smart kid. Well, then that's all you are. And so you draw a lot of comfort from that because that becomes your identity to some extent. Right. And maybe you did have an inclination to music or to sports or to being book smart. Maybe so that gave you a little bit of a leg up because you were the violin girl. You had that a little bit, and so you're comfortable in that. But the detriment is then you think, oh, I can't do the other things, or I'm not good at the other things, and this is all that I am. This is all that I can be. Right. I'm not going to be able to. Maybe I am good at music, but I really wanted to be good at sports, but I'm not. And so there's a kind of a dual-edged sword to that comfort, but it also limits where you are able to go and what you're able to do. Because like you said at the beginning, there's so much ego tied to it, and we don't want to be vulnerable and show that we don't know something. Right, yeah. It takes a vulnerability, and it takes a willingness to take an honest look and take responsibility, because otherwise it can just be an excuse. Well, that's how I was born, or this is this set of circumstances I was given, that kind of thing. Yeah, and if you're getting into things like if you really have a goal or a dream to accomplish a certain thing, and but you've convinced yourself, or you've been told you can't do that, or you're not going to do that, well, you have that as a fallback as to why you never accomplished that. And we've talked about regret a lot already in some of these series. Yeah. But, that would be a sad thing to have let that self-talk, that limiting belief, that fixed mindset to hold you back. Yeah. But I think it's a coping mechanism for protecting us from failure too, right? Yeah. Because there is always a risk regardless. There's always a risk. No matter how hard you work, no matter how hard you try, there's always a risk for failure. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's a coping mechanism to say, oh, I just wasn't gifted in that area, and my friend, they had a leg up, they were smarter than me, they were more talented than me. Well, then I just didn't have that. Well, then that's an excuse I can use and make myself feel better because in my mind I wasn't able to do that. Yeah, no, I agree. Did you have a quote that you were I wanted to share something from a book that I'm reading right now. It's by Jim Quick. He's kind of a brain coach and teaches people how to learn. And he was talking about this idea of growth and fixed mindset. And he calls the idea of coming out of that, he calls it unlimiting. And he says, the act or process of casting aside inaccurate and restrictive perceptions of one's potential and embracing the reality that, with the right mindset, motivation, and methods, there are no limitations. And then he also talks a little bit more about this idea, and he says that most everybody limits and shrinks their dreams to fit their current reality. We convince ourselves that the circumstances we are in, the beliefs we've accepted, and the path we are on is who we are and who we always will be. But there is another choice, and we're going to get into that a little bit, but I think that kind of is a good synopsis of what we're talking about. Yeah, I totally agree. I love that. Okay, so are you ready to talk about what the origins are? Yes. So one thing that when we were putting together our notes for tonight, we were like, what sort of is, how do we go about making this change from the fixed to the growth mindset? And so
one thing that we realized was you have to go back to your past, because often that's going to be an indicator of why you believe what you believe in general. And so who was speaking into you? What were their expectations of you, whether it was a teacher or a mentor or a parent or your peers even? And so there are these beliefs, right, that like you hear growing up, like you may hear, you know, you're not smart, or you're not good at sports, or you look bad in, or, you know, fill in the blank, right? You're not talented in. And so this is an opportunity for you to, as objectively as possible, I think, go back and say, okay, what were those beliefs that led up to this belief that I have about myself right now? Because usually it's not just magically one day I believe this thing. No.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenging thing, and that's the really the deep thing, because we're both about 30 years old, and we can think back to, if we really tried, to things that we're dealing with now that the origin was when we were young, or when we were in high school, when we were in college. And the thing is that a lot of these beliefs, like, somebody else gave them to us, but over time we've incorporated those into our own belief system,
into your identity,
and that's just what you may not even remember necessarily why that started, or the origin. That's just who you are now. And so that's the difficulty with it, and why it's so important that with these belief systems, this mindset, that we try to break free of those, because like, they have lifelong implications.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just was thinking about, you know, why is it that we take on something? It could even be something like that somebody said to us in passing, or maybe they didn't even say anything, but the way that they acted, and we take it on and we incorporate it into our identity. And I think sometimes, I heard this kind of like almost crude quote today, not in language, but just kind of like a raw example, that basically when we're born, that they cut the umbilical cord, you know, that we have connected to our mom, to say, you're separate now. You're this other person. You're not a part of her anymore. And yes, you still have the same DNA, and she's going to raise you, and hopefully your dad's in the picture and all those things, right? But doesn't mean that you're not going to need their love. But his point was that we spend our lives trying to plug the cord back in the sense that we give people power over us, and that somehow their opinions or their thoughts about us or their behavior toward us is so important to who we are that we can't function, or we can't live our lives without them pouring into us and defining who we are. We're somehow dependent on the opinions of other people. And that really has a lot to do with what we're talking about, I think, with fixed mindset. You know, that really stems from, and like you said, it is a coping mechanism, but it really stems from those beliefs. And as adults, we have this incredible opportunity to actually to reevaluate these beliefs and say, is this really true? You know, where did this come from? And now bring it to the present of, you know, what do we, you know, how do we untangle this belief? But I do think it starts with going back to the beginning and trying to see, okay, where did these beliefs come from? Why do I think the way that I do?
Yeah, and I mean, in most cases, when these start when you're a child or young, you're becoming an adult, you're on your way to adulthood, and you're impressionable. You're looking for these sources of affirmation. You're still a child, and you're looking up to, like you said, your parents, your coaches, your mentors, your peer group, and you take on what they say as fact without really having either maybe the skill set or just the belief yet, if you haven't been coached to have that, of forming your own opinion about yourself. And, you know, to be in a situation where it's a really toxic situation. It could be even worse if you're being told on a consistent basis, you're not enough, you're not this, you're not that. Then it's, it could be extremely difficult to break free from that. But I think a lot of it is because we're so impressionable and we're seeking that affirmation and that that area that we want to feel important. We want somebody to tell us who we are, because we are still kind of trying to figure out who we are, and so we're relying on them to tell us who am I, dad, who am I, mom, who am I, coach, and we're looking for that from other people.
Right, yeah. That validation from somebody else is just something that we crave, especially growing up. It's like, am I right? Am I doing this? I've never done this before, right? And then as we go into adulthood, we do the same things. And that's just natural. We're not criticizing that. We've all done it. And so how do we change our mindset?
I think we were going to talk about the example of the kids in school.
Oh yeah, that's right. Forgot about that. So I think one really cool thing here that we can mention, like I said, the expectations or even the words, like Matt mentioned, that people are pouring into us at a young age is really important. And one really good example of that is there was this program special situation that was almost treated like a study. And basically, they had two groups of students. And one group of students was like average or below achieving, something like that. And then the other one was like these really amazing ones, and that were, hitting great grades and excelling. And so for the group that was average or below, they told the teachers, these are high achieving students and they are amazing. And so we've chosen you guys to teach them. And then the other group, they said, oh, these are below average or average students. So we're going to have you guys work with them. And it's amazing because it was based on the expectations of the teachers. Again, what they expected of the students, how they treated the students. They could feel that the students could feel that. They could feel the energy behind that. They could feel the expectation, the excitement. They knew that they saw that somebody believed in them. And so the underachieving or average students excelled and did amazing. And at the end of the year, they were like, so these were actually the achieving or average students. I apologize if I got that story a little bit not quite accurate, but you get the idea that these students, it's really based on your expectations. And haven't you seen that in your life? Like if you go into a situation where you're like, where you you go in with a lot of enthusiasm and you're believing that this situation is going to be great. Your attitude, your beliefs about it, what you bring to the table, your mindset affects the whole experience. And it goes so much better than if your mindset was in a different place and your beliefs about what you're going into, what you're facing, are negative and lack that excitement, enthusiasm, expectation of really good things. And so I think that really shapes, again, where are these beliefs coming from, and then what kind of expectations. Really what you're doing is you're setting the tone. What kind of mindset are you bringing to the table? Because that's going to affect the results that you're seeing.
Yeah, I think that story is powerful from a couple examples. One, because it's you see both sides. The teacher was impacted as well as the kids.
Yeah.
The kids, they raised their level because the teacher believed in them. The teacher raised her level and her level of belief because she thought the kids were somebody they weren't. She treated them differently,
right? Because
she thought they were already they already had this high IQ. They were already high achievers, and so how she related to them was different.
Right.
And so I think for us, that's like, okay, well, when I go into situations, if I'm leading, whether in the home or at work or at school, any kind of peer group, how am I treating them? Because if I expect the best of them, if I treat them like they already are higher achieving, then they're going to raise that level. And then also how I think we can turn it on ourselves. If I talk to myself, if I treat myself that I'm a high achiever, I can attain the goals that I want, then logically I'm going to get those.
Right.
If I treat myself as I am the person that can run a marathon, I am the person that can start a business, I am the person that can, change my health, whatever it is, then I'm going to eventually be that.
Right. And it's not like you're sitting there lying to yourself or anyone else. It's more about what are you capable of. That's what we're really talking about. And it reminds me of the example of the tree. Have you heard that one about how tall a tree can grow?
As far as it.
Yeah, as far as it can.
Yeah.
It keeps growing, right? It doesn't like have a limit. It doesn't go like, and I'm now at however many hundreds of feet or whatever. Like it doesn't go, that's my quota, that's my cap. You know, it keeps growing as far as it can, and it stretches out as wide as it can. Its roots go as deep and wide as it can, right? And that's where we have that capability, right? But we allow our minds to box us in and say, oh, this is our quota, this is what I'm capable of, this is my comfort zone. But really, we're capable of so much more than that. Okay, so let's talk about now. You ready to talk about how to change your mindset? So we were trying to think of examples in our own lives about like when did we go through a mindset shift? And I can think of a lot of different examples for me, but one thing that was difficult for me, and I know we've talked about, you know, us moving here and that whole process, but one thing I didn't really talk about was like my mindset had to change a lot before I was really ready to even entertain wanting to move somewhere else. So I was born and raised, if you don't know this already, in Ohio. And so I love the Midwest. It's so wonderful. My favorite state is actually Indiana. And so we were living there at the time, right? And it was amazing and we loved it. We loved our community and our church family there and just so much about it we loved. And I had this wonderful group of students that were just precious, and I had worked so hard to build the studio and these relationships with them. And so for me, even moving like a 15-minute drive further away or something, you know, so that we were slightly in another town was like freaking me out at first, when we were looking to buy a house, for example. And so my mindset was such that I was like, oh, I have to be in these boundaries because I still want my students to be able to come to me, and I have to, you know, we're doing this thing and I built this thing, and, you know, and I didn't see a world outside of my studio that I had built. And there's nothing wrong, obviously, with building a studio and sticking with it. I'm not saying that that's a problem, but when I really started to get clear about I want to do more, and then when we got together and started having those conversations of we want to do more, we have these visions of being able to serve on a bigger level, of being able to live different places, it was like then my mind could actually start to open up. And you know, I don't know if there was like one particular moment for me, but there were definitely some shifts just by like reading different books and having different influences. Again, who's speaking into your life was huge. And then one thing that we talked about is, you know, you kind of have sort of a pivot moment, even if it's not like one specific moment, like at 10:35 on Tuesday, the whatever, you know, it may be kind of this like time period where you're kind of having a shift. And it starts with like asking yourself questions and like questioning how I've done things before, looking back at those origin thoughts, and then starting to question and starting to look at, is there something outside of how I've been thinking this whole time? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit last time, but asking the right questions. So if you can go back, and a lot of times asking the right questions is how we can manufacture that trigger point or that turning point, if you will, and really get that flip of start switching our mindset. And like Megan mentioned, if you can go back to, okay, well, here's this limiting belief I have, here's this fixed mindset that I have. Well, what was the origin of that? Okay, well, is that true? And so you have to really be honest with yourself. And so let's just say that you're not athletic. Okay, is that, maybe somebody told you that, maybe your parents told you that, your coach told you that, your peer group made fun of you for not being fast enough, or not being able to shoot baskets well enough, whatever. Okay, well, is that really true? Okay, well, let's say it is true. You're not very good right now. Okay, well, then what are you going to do? That gives you a starting point.
Yeah.
And that's why I love things like music and athletics, because they're so applicable to life.
Yes.
I can go and I can spend an hour a day shooting baskets and I'm going to get better. No matter how terrible I am, it's just, if you put in reps, you're going to get better. If you're playing an instrument and you're terrible, if you start practicing the right way, you're going to get better. And that really applies to not just those things, but a lot of things. So if that's true, then okay, well, now I have a starting point to get better. And if it's not true, then you have to stop listening. You have to increase your self-belief. You have to increase your ability to coach yourself, as opposed to letting these outside influences tell you who you are.
Right. Stop trying to plug that umbilical cord.
Right. So I mean, either whatever the answer to the question is, the response is that you have an option to get better if you want.
Right.
It gives you there's no more excuse. Yeah. I mean, you can make the excuse and you can decide, okay, I'm going to be a victim. But if you're being honest, that question, asking yourself the right question, you have a decision to make, whether you're going to get better or whether you're just going to stay as you are.
Yeah. I've mentioned before Jim Rohn, a great business coach and other things, sort of philosopher, I suppose, who passed away several years ago. But he has this, he always talked about, it kind of had this famous quote, like, don't wish things were different, wish you were better. And I think a lot of the time we spend so much time and energy and focus on the way things are. Well, that's just the way things are. That's the way things are. I mean, if you know me, you know one of my least favorite quotes or phrases, cliches, is "it is what it is." You know, often it isn't what it is. It's not often set. Some things, yes, are set, but most things can be changed. Like if you move into a house, it doesn't mean you're gonna live there forever. It means that you're gonna live there for a time and you can move if you want. You can sell the house or whatever it is. I think sometimes we think so, like it has to be this, it has to be that, it has to be this forever. And instead of thinking, okay, maybe this is a season that I'm in this, or yeah, maybe I can't control what people in the government are doing, but what can I control? Well, I can control if I start a business, or if I work harder with my job, or see if there's a plan where I can move up in the company and be able to take on more responsibility, or have a different role, or change jobs altogether, or getting to counseling with my spouse or individually or whatever, to be able to help my relationships grow. You know, there's always things that we can do to improve ourselves, and that's the difference. The fixed mindset and the growth mindset, it's two ways of kind of the same street there. They both have to do with us, what we control about ourselves, how we view the world, how we show up in the world, what we can do to help ourselves be better. All those things, it starts with us. And we can either go into victim mindset and say, that's kind of the fixed mindset road, and say, oh, it is what it is. Or we can say growth mindset and say, well, I can change what I can control. And that is a lot. You can control a lot. I don't mean, you know, every single thing in your life. I mean about how you show up in the world, what your thoughts are, where you go, what you focus on, what you spend energy on, whether it's mentally or emotionally or whatever it is, who you spend your time with, all those things. We can change those things if we want to. Like at a certain point, you have to start going, okay, I'm going to face this and make a decision, you know, to either fall into victim mindset, fixed mindset, or growth mindset. I think that's really what it is.
I mean, you just have to be honest with yourself then, and stop telling yourself, if you really don't want to put in the time, then just admit that to yourself and say, all right, I'm not going to do that thing. I've been telling people I want to run a marathon. I've been telling people I want to start a business, but I'm just not willing to put in the work that it takes. And so at least then you're being honest with yourself and with others, and taking that off the table, and not blaming, well, so-and-so has more money than me, so-and-so has more opportunity, so-and-so has more talent than me. And I think, you know, it does go back to that growth. You know, are you willing to put in the work to accomplish what you want to or not? And the ironic thing is, a lot of times these people that we see and we say, oh, they were more talented than me, oh, they had more money than me, oh, they were just given, they had more innate ability, they were smarter than me. A lot of times that even actually isn't the case. We didn't see their journey. Like, we're not with them. You know, exactly. I see somebody out on the basketball court and I think, wow, they're so good. I can never be that good. I don't know that they've put in 10,000 hours in the gym, that they've been working and working and working.
Yeah.
A lot of times, yes, some people may have a natural ability a little bit, but they still have to work really hard.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times that story that we're telling ourselves that they had more opportunity and they were given more and they were more talented isn't even a true story at all, even.
Right.
And so it still goes back to what we said, that it's always up to you.
Yeah.
What you choose to do. Now, maybe you're never going to be the best in the world at something, but that doesn't mean you can't be way, way better than you are now.
Yeah, and I think too, we tell ourselves a couple lies about this, about like, well, you know, let's say more natural ability. Well, when they were born and they were a baby, they didn't have, I mean, yeah, they might have had some influences, but that's only so much, you know? You didn't, you know, no baby is born and starts a business the next day. Like, that's not how it works. They have to go through life. They have to learn. And so I think sometimes we tell ourselves people are born this way, or they've got an earlier start. You know, let's say, pretending here that I'm 60 and I want to start a business or write a book or go back to school, and well, so-and-so started earlier. Okay, so what? You probably have another 25 years in you, looking at the national averages, depending on your, you know, gender and all that. But, you know, I mean, you look at that. People are living longer and longer. This could be your second win. This could be your next thing. And why say, oh, I can't do that because of your age? Age, come on. You know, you've got a lot left in you. It's amazing, you know, how many people say, like, I want to retire early just to be able to sit around, and then they sit around and then they don't have any purpose in life, and then they die earlier. Like, that's so sad. So find something that really sets your soul on fire here, and be willing to have that growth mindset when it comes to it, instead of making excuses about, well, they started earlier or whatever else. You can't start everything when you're young. You can only start a few things anyways. And who knows? I was thinking about, there's this really famous singer, I can't remember her name. It's Sylvia McNair, I think is her name. And she studied with a friend of mine, a teacher, and violin. She studied violin all growing up. She was going to this private Christian school to major in violin, and her teacher, my friend, was suggested that she go and take a couple voice lessons, because that can help with your violin playing. It's very close to, those instruments are very similar in some ways, just lyrically and phrasing wise. And so it was so interesting, because she ended up being this really famous singer because he encouraged her to go get some voice lessons. And she was already in her, you know, early 20s or late teens, at least at that point. So yeah, she had some musical training, but she didn't know about voice at that point. So you never know. You never know where you're going to be led next. It's just about taking the next right steps and being willing to have that growth mindset, I think. So, and you know, I think this naturally flows into our theme, which is, you know, no more some days. I was thinking about that, you know, like, what is the application for no more some days? You know,
I don't know.
Being willing.
I mean, yeah, I think you have to be willing to face those things from your past, because a lot of them can be, you've had this belief for a long time, and you have to, you know, be honest with yourself and be vulnerable with yourself, and really come to terms with, am I really going to chase this thing that I've told myself for 10 plus years that I want to chase? You know, something that might be bothering you from somebody told you weren't smart, you weren't good looking, you weren't athletic from when you were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Are you willing to face that and try to change and do better? Or do you just want to keep living the life that you have now, that you have that, I'll just say it, trauma from your past? Are you willing to face that trauma and move on? Because there's no point in going in proceeding with that. Like, we only have one life. There are no more Sundays. So I think the application is you have to come to terms with those. You have to have that inner conversation and really be honest with yourself and decide, am I willing to continue to live with this regret and this belief that may or may not be true, or can I go ahead and face that and get better and move on from there? And there's just so much opportunity in life, and there's so much room to grow. There's so many resources, whatever it is that you're struggling with, that you have that fixed mindset on. Like, I almost guarantee you there's resources available, like right now, after you logged off this, that you could go figure something out and take a step if you wanted to. And so I think the application is just to have that conversation with yourself and start tomorrow, start today in fixing that.
Right. I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, there's like infinite resources on the internet. I actually found today, was it? Yeah. iTunes like University, they have all these like free courses. So I was like, what? This is amazing. And so I started a course today. Like, what could you start today? It doesn't mean that you're, going to be perfect. Like, nobody's perfect. But if you're starting down the path and being open and being willing to have that mindset to change, okay, I'm going to see the possibility where I could grow and learn and change the way that I look at this, then you will be one step closer to your goals. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at it a lot of some days because you're going to be waiting in that fixed mindset, like, oh, well, yeah, one day if I win the lottery and never actually play the lottery, like that's not a plan.
I think one thing I've noticed too lately is like nobody is going to come and tell you it's okay to start. Nobody's going to come and fix that thing from the past and say, no, so-and-so, you are healthy, you are athletic, you do play an instrument well, you do have a good voice, you can sing. Nobody's going to give you that okay.
Yeah.
Like nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to give you the permission. Like you have to, I think that's the other thing we talked about is you have to make that shift from relying on other people to tell you who you are. You have to start listening to who you are.
Yeah.
And even if you want to take it in a religious perspective, you got to start listening to who God says you are.
Yes.
So like we have to grow up in that area, and something I haven't grown up, I'm still trying to grow up in that area, is letting go of those things from the past.
Right.
And learning who God says that I am, and who then from a secondary level, who I say I am and who I want to be.
Yes.
Because nobody's coming to fix that thing from 10, 15 years ago. Like, I may want them to, I may wish they would, but they're not going to. Yeah. So it's up to me and it's up to God to get that where it needs to be so I can move forward.
Yeah, and get that healing, however that looks like for you, and then moving forward. And I think also, along with that, believe, from a spiritual perspective, believing that God gave you everything you need to be the best you and to be able to do the things you need to be able to do. Maybe you're not, meant to be doing whatever so-and-so is doing on Instagram and is posting about all the time. Fine. You're meant to do something else. Find out what that is and do that thing, because God's given you time. He's given you everything you need. You just need to go out there and get it. I think a lot of the time we limit ourselves, again, with this fixed mindset. And he says, I'm going to take care of you. I love you and I want to provide for you. I think if we're doing this with a humble heart and focusing on giving him glory, there's nothing better we can be doing with our time and with our mindset. I love what Lori said, don't die with the song in you. Leave it all out on the field, as they say. So I think that's all that we had. We want to thank you guys so much for watching and for following us. We're going to be starting to expand some things out, so be watching for some updates. If you're not already following us and subscribing on YouTube, we would love for you to subscribe on there, leave a comment or review. We would love that. We are just YouTube. If you go to YouTube, it's just No More Some Days, and we would love to hear from you guys and share it with your friends. If you think of a friend who could be encouraged by this video, please tag them in the comments. And this video is public, so they should be able to see it and hopefully be able to benefit from it. So
you can tag your enemies as well. We happily welcome them. Either or, we're equal opportunity here.
Equal opportunity. Maybe they will grow in their mindset, right? All right. Take care, guys. Have a great night.
Bye.